Greek nouns, the second declension. The second declension is thankfully even easier than the first, so it kind of acts as a break before we get to the third. As you recall, there are three kinds of declensions in Greek. The first, which is mostly feminine, ending in alpha or eta, gnome. The second, which is either masculine or neuter. And the third, also called the consonant declension, which can occur in the feminine, the neuter, or the masculine. But today, I want to focus on the second declension. There are four kinds of second declensions. The first two are the most common, and the last two I put up for you as reference. It's more important that you know the first two like the back of your hand, and that you know that the second two exist so that you can look them up if you get confused in a translation. The first kind is the plain vanilla masculine. It is the most common variety, and it occasionally occurs in the feminine. That's a word like anthropos anthropou, which you've seen before. The second kind is the neuter variety. These are words like ergon, ergu, work, task. Nearly as common as the masculine, and it's just as important that you recognize it and are able to decline it fully. The attic declension is the weird one. It's so weird that actually only two varieties exist of this. The word neos, neo, temple, and leos, leo, people. It's really more important that you memorize that those two words are exceptional in the attic declension than that you memorize their specific declension table. Because you're only going to see these words in Attic authors, and you're rarely going to see them where you won't recognize that they're a funky second declension. Hopefully because of this video. And the last is the contract declension, which certainly isn't unimportant in terms of nouns, but it becomes more important when we look at contract adjectives, which are a little bit more common. The two most important contract declension nouns of the second declension are nous, meaning mind, and ostun, meaning bone. As always, we remember that the dictionary entry is what allows us to know all of the information we need to in order to work with the noun. So knowing the word when you can see it in the wild in translation is only part of the battle. Be sure to study your note cards and memorize the entire dictionary entry for each noun. And of course, finding the stem is an important part of that when it comes to declining the noun. So the genitive singular is still the key. If we find the genitive singular, knock it off, and we're left with the stem, which can be as small as a single letter, though rarely. Let's take a look at the plain vanilla masculine version with the word angelos. Angelos, angelu, angelo, angelon, angele, angeloi, angelon, angelois, angelus, angeloi. It's not that hard. We notice that the accent moves in a fairly predictable manner. So whenever the ultima, or the last syllable, is long, the accent will be pulled forward onto the epsilon. That's pretty normal behavior. The slightly abnormal thing that we wouldn't expect is that the diphthong omicron iota is actually considered short in everything except the optative mood of the verb. The only thing I would add here, or caution, is that some of these nouns that we call the masculine variety can actually be feminine. The most famous one that you know is he choros, which is road. The plain neuter variety is the exact same and follows all the rules of the neuter, where the accusative and the nominative in both the singular and the plural are always the same. The other thing is the vocatives are much more predictable here in the neuter than they are even in the masculine. The attic declension, again, I put up here for reference. I do want to point out a couple things while it's up here for reference. The dative singular looks as we would expect it to, having some sort of omicron or omega form and an iota involved. That iota subscript is almost always a sign of the dative, except in the attic declension where it can creepily be a sign of the nominative plural. Not really sure why that's creepy, but pretend that you're creeped out. The accusative looks exactly like what we would expect to see the genitive plural look like. And so this overlap can make this declension very confusing, which makes it worth looking up when you're trying to parse out a translation. Knowing the difference between it being accusative singular and genitive plural can make all the difference in the world in unlocking the meaning of a sentence. And finally, the contract declension. I give nous here because it is the most common. You're going to see it in the singular more often than you're going to see it in the plural, but it's worth memorizing not just because you'll see it as a noun, but you'll also see it as an adjective ending when we get to adjectives.